Hi, I'm Nicole with MorningChores.com, and today we're going to teach you how to dry your very own herbs. People have been drying their own herbs since the beginning of time, but before we get into the history, I wanted to define the difference between an herb and a spice. An herb tends to be the fresh or dried leaves of a plant, whereas a spice is a dried flower, fruit, bark, root, or seed of a plant. So just to give you an example, most of us are familiar with cilantro. Cilantro's leaves can be dried as the herb, or you can save the cilantro seeds and use it as a spice called coriander. Spices were made popular around 950 BC when Arabs traveled what's called the incense route. They traveled this route through India, China, and Southeastern Asia, bringing exotic spices to the Greeks. The Greeks then traded with the Romans, and then Rome distributed exotic spices throughout Europe. Today you can walk into any grocery store and find a plethora of herbs and spices. But we wanted to show you how to do it yourself because it's very rewarding and you know exactly where those herbs are coming from. There's lots of benefits to drying your own herbs and spices. The first is you know exactly where it's coming from, especially if you grow the plant yourself and then you harvest the herbs off that plant. You've been with that plant for the entire growing season, so you know exactly what that plant has been exposed to. Another reason is it's very economical to grow and dry your own herbs. Buying them from the mainstream grocery store is probably the most expensive option out there, especially if you're buying them organic. Another reason to dry your own herbs is they will be much more fresh than what you can purchase in the grocery store, which means they will be packed full of flavor and aroma. Those flavors will really make your meals scrumptious and delicious. And the last reason is a lot of people like to dry their own herbs for medicinal purposes. You can make tinctures and teas from certain herbs, and they have a lot of medicinal factors. When it comes to harvesting your herbs, there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. The first thing is every plant is different as far as how to harvest. Now I know I said we're mainly going for the leaves, but there's some plants where you pick off the leaves themselves, and there's other plants where you cut the entire stem at the base. So make sure you do your research before trying this on your plants at home. The supplies that you need to harvest your herbs are two things: a container or basket to carry your harvest in, and a pair of scissors. When you go to harvest your herbs, it's really important that you think in thirds. When it comes to harvesting a plant, we always want to take everything that's ready and available, but that's really not the best thing for the plant itself. So when you go to harvest, only harvest 1/3 of what's ready on the plant. The other third you're going to leave for the plant to propagate itself for the upcoming year. And the last third you're going to leave for the pollinators. You know, it's really important that we think of the bees and the butterflies. If it wasn't for them, we would not have fruits or vegetables. So make sure you leave some food behind for them. Make sure that you're choosing healthy stalks and healthy leaves. They're vibrant green. There's no yellowing or brown spots. And the last consideration to keep in mind is make sure you harvest your herbs before the plant flowers. When the plant flowers, the energy is spent going into the flowering process. So some of the aroma and flavor in the leaves dissipates. So it's not that you can't harvest after a plant flowers, just know that your herbs will not be as flavorful or aromatic. There's a couple different ways to harvest. As I said, some plants you're going for the leaves themselves, and there's other plants where you're cutting the stalks. Here I have a hydroponic basil plant. I've had this on my kitchen counter next to my kitchen sink in front of a window. So yes, you can grow herbs in your kitchen year round if you have a sunny window. So I purchased this and I've had it on my windowsill, and I've been plucking it off and using it in my cooking. So basil is very easy to harvest. All you're going to do is find the big healthy leaves. You don't want to let them get too big. They will lose some of their flavor. This is a little bit too big, but I'm still going to go ahead and harvest it. So all you're going to do is find where the leaf meets the main stalk, and you're going to snip it off with your fingernail. Very simple. The next plant I wanted to demo for you guys is cilantro. Cilantro is very popular. Before I demonstrate how to harvest this, I wanted to give a pro tip. If you enjoy fresh herbs in your cooking and in your kitchen, what you can do is put your fresh herbs in a glass jar with water, stick this in your fridge, and they will last much, much longer. I've had cilantro last up to a month, not always, but I've had it last up to a month in my refrigerator. So keep that in mind the next time you purchase fresh herbs from the grocery store, or you grow them in your garden and you bring them inside. Now, cilantro is the same as basil. You're pinching off the leaves. And again, you want healthy, green, vibrant leaves that don't have any yellowing or brown spots. Once you have your herbs harvested, there's a couple methods for drying. You can do something as simple as I'm doing here and placing them on a plate. You could use a paper plate, and then what you would do is just put these in a undisturbed spot on your kitchen counter or in a different room where no one will disturb them. And you basically just spread them out evenly on the plate. And it will take several weeks for them to dry this way, but this is a really cheap, easy way to dry your herbs. Another method is drying your herbs on parchment paper. So you take a cookie sheet, baking sheet, or you can use a cutting board, spread your parchment paper on top of that, and then you can spread your herbs here. I have rosemary, and this is one of those herbs where you would harvest the entire stem, but I just have this laid out on my parchment paper, and it's the same thing. You're gonna put this in an area in your kitchen undisturbed where it can sit there and dry for as long as it's needed. The next method for drying your herbs is using a dry rack. Now, if you've been following our videos, you've seen me recommend this thing before. I love this thing. I purchased it from Layman's.com. It has 4 drawers, and it's just like the plate method or the parchment paper method. All you do is pull a drawer out. I've got cilantro drying there. I just spread the cilantro out on the screen, close it up, and you're good to go. It keeps your herbs or whatever it is you're drying organized and kind of out of sight, out of mind, and you can dry more herbs in a smaller space. The last option for dehydrating or drying your herbs is buying an electric dehydrator. I personally have not used one of these, but you can purchase them on Amazon or also any department store that sells appliances or small kitchen appliances. But this is something that works very quickly. So the drying methods that I showed you with the dry rack and the plate and parchment paper method, the one downside is it takes a long time. It could take anywhere from a week to 1 month to dry your herbs, depending on the time of year, the humidity level in your home, and things like that. So if time is an issue for you, and I could understand that if you don't have a lot of kitchen space, then you may want to opt for an electric dehydrator. Just know that they do consume a lot of electricity, and they also can be noisy. Now let's talk about what to do once your herbs are dried. I have some basil here that's already been dried, and you know it's completely dried when you can crumble it in your hand, just as I'm doing right now. If you can't do this and it doesn't turn into little tiny pieces, then it still needs some more drying time. Now, depending on how you like your herbs, if you like them ground really fine, then you may need something like a mortar and pestle. This is something I use to grind my herbs really fine, the ones that I like to be powdery form. But if there's an herb that I don't necessarily need that to be, such as basil, I don't really mind if it's a little bit chunky, then I'll just take it with my fingers and just crumble it between my fingers and let it fall on a plate like this, and then I'll store it in a glass jar. Very simple. Some herbs you don't even do anything to, you just use them in their whole leaf form. Now, when it comes to storing your herbs, my favorite method is using the glass jar. I use mason glass jars because they're easy, simple, you can find them anywhere, and then I use these plastic lids that they sell specifically for mason jars. What I love about these plastic lids is you can write with a Sharpie on them and it will stay on there enough to keep your things labeled, but when you go to wash this, you can actually wash it off. So I feel like it's the best of both worlds, but always make sure that you label what herb or spice you are storing and the year that you harvested it. You can also store your herbs in Ziploc bags. This isn't my favorite method, mainly because it's difficult to see what's what when they are in your cupboard space, but this is an option, so if you don't have any glass jars handy, you can opt for Ziploc bags. I hope you enjoyed today's video. All the links I referenced will be in the description box below. Be sure to head over to morningchores.com where you'll find all kinds of information on homesteading, gardening, recipes, and much, much more.